Imagine with me for a minute that it's 1966. You're 18 years old. You're in the prime of your life. You've got your driver's license, a boyfriend and girlfriend, or girlfriend, not boyfriend, a boyfriend or girlfriend, right? And you've got big dreams ahead for your life. You're excited that you're prime of your life. But in a series of circumstances that you don't exactly understand, all of a sudden your driver's license now means nothing. The picture of your boyfriend or girlfriend is in your wallet, and all those dreams are put on hold. And you're in a country thousands of miles away from home. Welcome to Vietnam. And on this particular day, you would rather be anywhere but there, because you're about to go out on a patrol. Now, you've done patrols before, and none of them are pleasant, but you feel a little extra pressure. In fact, a whole bunch more pressure this time, because your leader, your battalion leader, has said that you're going to be the point person or the point man of that particular patrol. And you feel the immense pressure of that, because you know as you walk into that jungle and experience all the danger that there is already, that you are now, as the leader, responsible for the 7 soldiers that are right behind you. In many ways, your ability to lead will either allow them to continue living or might just lead to their death. And you feel incredibly intense pressure. You feel something deep inside your stomach, and you feel adrenaline like you've never felt before. You literally feel it coursing through your veins. And in reality, as you enter the jungle with these guys behind you, you don't know what's out there. Intelligence the night before said that there was some enemy activity in the area, and your job on this mission is either to confirm or deny that intelligence. But you don't know if they can see you. They may be 100 yards away, they may be a long ways away, or they may be looking at you right now, and you have no way to know what's going on. But all you know is that it's your responsibility to lead, and it's your responsibility to keep your guys safe. And your inability to lead could put them in danger, and that scares you, but you know you've got to do the very best you can. And so you're watching at your feet to watch for any kind of wires that might be some sort of a trap, but you also have your eyes in the trees because you're looking for snipers. And one more time, you turn and look at the 7 guys behind you, knowing that their lives are in your hands in a significant way. And then you hear the gunfire and the yells. And all of a sudden, you realize that you are outnumbered, you're outmanned, you're outgunned. And if you're going to escape this alive, it's in your hands. I cannot begin to imagine what that would feel like. I've never been in a situation like that where my life is at stake. Never even close. Nothing like that. Some of you, perhaps, a small number of you, perhaps have been in a situation like that, and you'd do anything to get rid of those memories. But let's make a critical change to this story we're imagining. You're still in Vietnam, and you're still leading people through the jungle, and the enemy is all around. You don't know exactly where they're at. But here's the change that I want you to imagine. I want you to imagine that behind you, the people that you're leading, because you're still the point person, is your family. Maybe your spouse, your kids. I don't care if you're male, female, college student, teenager. I want you to imagine that you're the leader, and it's your family that's behind you that you're responsible for leading right now. And some of them are crying quietly, and they're scared. Some of them are trying to act brave. But you're responsible to lead them through. Maybe for college students, it's your roommates. And while usually everything's a big joke for you and your roommates, there's no joke about this, because you've never experienced this kind of fear and this kind of danger in your life. Or maybe it's the people in your club, the people that you're closest to, you're responsible for them. And so your goal on this mission is not to engage the enemy, but to completely avoid the enemy and get around the enemy. And so it's on you to watch for snipers and traps and all of the potential dangers that surround you, knowing that you're responsible. You're responsible for those people behind you that you love the most. What are you feeling in that moment? I imagine you're feeling adrenaline like you've never felt before. Probably a pretty healthy dose of fear, but probably a pretty significant level of determination because of the people that you're leading in this moment and because lives are at stake. Here's the deal. That's no imaginary situation. In fact, in Ephesians chapter 6, in the passage that Noah just read for us, I want you to read this with me again and hear Paul's words starting in verse 10. He says, "Be strong, finally be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His might." Why? Why do we have to be strong like this? He says in verse 11, "Put on the whole armor of God." Now here's the deal. If you grew up in church and you've heard that phrase, armor of God, 100 times, 1,000 times, and to you it's like some VBS story, right? Where you put on some little knight armor and it's real cute and it's kind of fun. Now here's what Paul's saying in modern terms. Put on what you need to get ready for battle. Whatever that would look like in modern terms, get ready, put that on. You're going to battle. Put on the whole armor of God. Why? That you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. The devil's out to get you. You got to be ready. Watch how he continues. This is important. "For we do not wrestle," it's a word that can mean fight in a battle. "We do not wrestle or struggle against flesh and blood." Well, let's just stop there and understand what this means. Paul is saying our fight, our battle, is not against human beings. All right? It's not against flesh and blood. Instead, here's what it's against. But against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness. Now, when you hear rulers and authorities and cosmic powers over the current darkness, or whatever your translation says there, there's this temptation to think, well, maybe that's like political forces in our world. No, it's not. No, it's not. This is about non-human beings. This is about spiritual forces of evil. He continues, "Against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God." Get ready for battle, "that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand firm." Now, we've reacted to this passage historically in different ways. Some have overreacted, but I think for most of us in the backgrounds that we grew up in, we underreacted to this. We've tried to kind of explain it away as meaning something else. But the reality that Paul is pointing us to is this: Satan and his angels are real, and they are active in our world right now. And that kind of weirds us out a little bit, because as educated Westerners, we like to think that there's not really that much of a spiritual world. Sure, God is at work. No, Paul's clear. There are spiritual forces, armies of Satan's angels at work in our world right now. And we've got to be ready for them. Now, even if you struggle with that concept and that weirds you out a little bit, you've seen the casualties. And so deep down inside, I think most of us know that those forces are at work. Is there anybody in your family that Satan has attacked and destroyed? Is there anybody in your high school youth group that was all engaged in church, but then you watched with tears in your eyes as Satan attacked and destroyed? You've seen the forces and power of Satan at work in the lives of people at your school or at work. For good grief, just turn the TV on for a little while. Here's what I want you to know this morning, and this is simple. This is it as we begin this series. This is the big thing I want you to walk away from. And I think Paul makes it abundantly clear. Spiritual warfare is real. This is not a joke. This is not just some cute series that we're coming up with today. Spiritual warfare is real. Now, some of you may be saying, well, Matt, that was a bit dramatic, wasn't it? Should you really describe what we face as Christians by comparing it to modern warfare or human warfare? And while I recognize, and I want to be very clear about this, I've never experienced anything like that. Never. But I think I can say this. The stakes that we face in this war are higher. Because physical lives aren't at stake. Eternal death and eternal life are at stake. And so I'll unapologetically use this as an illustration. Now again, I've never been there. I have no clue what it's like to face that kind of danger. This weekend, the other night, we watched the new movie Harriet, about Harriet Tubman and her fight and her rescue of slaves. And it's just an incredible story, and it's compelling, and it's sad, and it's hard to watch all at the same time. And it's incredible to watch how she, on her own, a small woman, would go and rescue slaves and then travel hundreds of miles with them through the woods, through the dark, trying to get them north. And constantly they were being hunted down by people who wanted nothing more to do than to catch them and torture them and kill them or take them back. I've never faced anything like that before, and I can't imagine what that's like. Well, I've never faced any physical warfare, and I've never faced anything like Harriet Tubman. I've never faced anything like Vietnam. I do want us to be really clear this morning that what we're facing in this spiritual battle is harder and it's harsher, and the consequences are eternal. And this matters. Spiritual warfare is real. Now, here's what I want to do with this series. There's from the movie. What we're going to do is we're going to try to define this battle, what it's like. We're just going to introduce all this today. Really just want you to walk away with this big idea today that spiritual warfare is real. Next week, we're going to talk about our enemy. All right, we're going to talk about Satan, where he came from, what his strategy is, and then in a couple of weeks, we'll dive into what our strategy should be in response to this. And all of this is kind of on this year-long emphasis. You know, we're walking through the Gospel of Luke, but we got 4 mini-series planned this year, and they all center around this theme, the spiritual life, navigating life through the Spirit. And maybe one of the most important things we can begin with is recognizing that in navigating this spiritual life, we are at war. So again, simple reality. This is all I really want you to walk away with today. And I don't think the sermon's done yet, but all I really want you to walk away with today is this: spiritual warfare is real. Now, here's my question. How does this change life? Because if we're honest, this ought to change things, shouldn't it? It's really easy to kind of float through life as if nothing is wrong and there's nothing going on in life. This changes things. I have read, again, never experienced, that when a country is in a time of war, they enter into what folks call a wartime mentality. And again, I've read that really the last time our entire nation went into a wartime mentality was during World War II, when everybody had to buy in. And everybody was involved in some way and contributing in some way. Now, opposed to that, we would live in right now what we might call a peacetime mentality. Though there's always danger and there's always war. But here's what happens. Here's what happens in countries and I think churches during times of peace. We get into this peacetime mentality and we waste. I've read that during World War II, there was no wasting. In fact, anytime gasoline or rubber or other important products were given out, they were given out grudgingly. And that people would save their extra silverware and pots and pans or any type of metal that they might contribute to the cause. And people bought war bonds. During World War II, people didn't waste because you couldn't afford to. There was no waste. But also during times of peace, we tend to focus a little bit more on autonomy and individualism. In other words, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. It's a free society. I can do what I want to do. And if I don't want to contribute to this at all, I don't really have to contribute to this at all. When a country's in a wartime mentality, most everybody recognizes that they've got to buy in at some level. It's not just about me. And isn't that true in a church as well? It's kind of the case when everything seems to be going, if we don't seem to recognize that we are at war, well, some of us might say, well, you know what? I'm going to do my own thing. I don't have to go all in. I don't have to buy in. I can do what I want to do. And you can do what you want to do. But if we recognize that we're at war, I think it elevates the status of each one of us, and we recognize that all of us are necessary. We're not in this alone. Which then leads us to the other way that we see a peacetime mentality. There's a lack of urgency. You know that in war, there are no timeouts. We play a lot of Nerf gun in my house. We have way too many of them. And there's a lot of Nerf gun fights, and there's a lot of fun. And here's what happens if I ever corner the kids with a Nerf gun, and I would never just lay into them with a Nerf gun. Maybe I would. Here's what happens sometimes. If they're stuck and they're out of ammunition, they'll say, time out, time out, time out. And then I'll lay into them then, usually, because I want to teach them a lesson. Not really. There are no timeouts in war, right? Isn't it funny in the church that sometimes we kind of lay back and think, well, there's no urgency here. Everything is good. Everything is peaceful. It's difficult at times to see Satan's work in the world if we're not thinking clearly. There's this lack of urgency that we buy into. The reality in war and the reality in this war that we're in right now is there are no timeouts. We're not in a peacetime as the church. We're in a time of war. So how do we win this war? Now, over the next few weeks, we're going to give lots of strategies to win this battle and how do we fight this battle. Let me just give you 3 or 4 big principles that I think are important as we enter into this war and recognize that spiritual warfare is real. What must exist in a country, but more importantly in a church and in the lives of Christians if we're going to win this battle? Here's the first one. There's got to be intelligence about the enemy. In the Battle of Midway, my understanding is there was this battle with the Japanese, and they had bad intelligence, and we knew the Japanese code. In fact, I think there's a movie out right now in the theaters called Midway about this. We had the code. We had intelligence, and we beat them in an overwhelming way. Everybody knows intelligence is vital. You've got to know what the enemy, at least have an idea of what the enemy is going to do if you're going to succeed in battle. The same is true in our battle with Satan. We've got to know what he's up to. In 2 Corinthians, Paul is dealing with this tension in the church, and there was this guy that had sinned. He addresses in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and he says, listen, you got to get rid of the guy, but apparently nobody would forgive the guy when he came back around. And so Paul says, listen, you got to forgive him. And here's what he says about Satan. He says, Satan's at work in what's going on here. In 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11, he kind of concludes with this. He says, so that we would not be outwitted by Satan. That gives you a little idea what Satan's up to. He's out to outwit us, to trick us. For we are not ignorant of his designs or his devices. Paul says, we've got some inside intelligence. We know what he's up to. That's going to help us succeed. Listen, if we're going to succeed in this spiritual war with Satan and his army, we've got to know what he's all about. And next week, we're going to spend the whole sermon talking about what Satan's about. We're going to do some intelligence. The second thing, a country, and more importantly, a Christian and church need to succeed in this battle is we need high morale. We need high morale. You know that there have been small armies that have defeated much larger armies because their morale was high and the larger army's morale was low. Some of those make some great movies and stories, don't they? You've seen that. It's amazing when that happens. It's because that's what happens when somebody's morale is high. Isn't it amazing that Satan can use this against us? That when things are really, really good, he can trick us into thinking that maybe things aren't so good. And he can discourage us, and then we start to talking about it and maybe discouraging others. I mean, look around. Things are good, but isn't it funny that even when things are really good, we can get kind of whiny and complainy and discouraged about good things? What is that? That's Satan. That's what it is. It's Satan. And the only way we're going to win this battle against Satan is if our morale is high. And let me tell you why our morale can be high. And we'll come back to this at the end of the message. Jesus has already won the war. He's already won. We're on the winning side. Now, Satan's still attacking and he's fighting, and we can still lose the battle right here around us, but Jesus has already won. Eternity is ours. Our morale ought to be higher than anybody else's. But here's the third way I think that the third thing we've got to have if we're going to win. We've got to be equipping. We've got to equip one another. The church must equip its members with what they need to fight this battle. Here's how Paul describes it in Ephesians chapter 4. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and the teachers. So church leaders, he's created people to be leaders. For what purpose? to make decisions about the church, right? A little bit more than that. While that's important, that's a part of it. What purpose? To equip the saints for the work of ministry, for the building up of the body of Christ. Our church leaders, elders, deacons, preachers, teachers, you know what their role is? Their role is to equip the church to fight this battle. In 2 Corinthians 10, 3 and 4, Paul says, "For though we walk in the flesh," here it is again, "we are not waging war according to the flesh." In other words, this is not a physical fight we're in. We're in a spiritual fight. Watch this. I've never really paid attention to these words until this week. "For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh." Right? So in this fight against Satan, we do not have physical weapons. That's obvious, simple, right? But the weapons we do have, here's what Paul says about them. They have divine power to destroy strongholds. Do you believe that? Do you believe that God has given us weapons to fight Satan that have divine power? Isn't that crazy to think about? That's what we have. You want high morale? Know that you've got weapons that can whoop Satan. We can win this war. Now, again, we play with a lot of Nerf guns in our house. Can you imagine if our government all of a sudden said, you know, money is low, things are not good, so we've contracted with Nerf to provide our military with the weapons they need. Now, that's ridiculous, right? Absolutely ridiculous. And if you've ever bought some Nerf things before, it's still pretty expensive if you get the right brand. That's ridiculous. Our government is serious, I think, at least, about equipping our military with what they need. Some of you have been to basic training before, right? And so before you even get to join the military, what's the military trying to do? They're trying to equip you and prepare you. It's constant and it's nonstop. It's big. And some of you have done some significant things to equip yourself to serve in the military. And the good news is we've got the equipment that we need, and we need to be about equipping one another for this battle. And here's the fourth thing we need. We need unity. We've got to be unified to win this battle. Do you remember, some of you at least, the days after 9/11, how unified our country was, how unified government officials were? Some of you can still picture in your mind Democrats and Republicans standing side by side on the steps of the Capitol singing "God Bless America." It's almost unimaginable today, I know that, right? But you can remember that moment because that's what times of war do. They bring us together, and the only way we'll succeed is when we're all in and we're all in together. If we're going to succeed in this fight against Satan, we've got to be all in. Now, as you look at this list of 4 things that we need to win, a couple of those are all about this series. Next week and in the weeks to come, intelligence and equipping. We're going to do that. But I'm going to leave 2 of these to you. And so I want you to ask yourself this question today. When it comes to morale, how are you contributing to the morale of this body of Christians and other Christians around you in this fight against Satan? Is it positive? Do people look to you to reinforce them, to encourage them? Or could it be that people avoid you because they don't want to walk away discouraged? Or could it be that they feed off of the negativity that you bring to the table? Listen, if we're going to win this battle, if we're going to fight this thing together successfully, we need God, of course. We're not neglecting that. But we need to be encouraging to one another. This isn't going to work otherwise. And then the second one that I'm going to leave to you to think through is unity. If we're going to do this, we've got to be unified. So let me ask you, are you an agent of unity? In this body, this congregation, among the Christians here, are you an agent of unity, students at Freed-Hardeman? Because it turns out, though, you're going to compete against each other in some different things, In reality, we're all in this war together. And if we can't join hands in this war because we're too busy fighting each other in other games or events, then all of us are probably going to fall. Are you a source of unity wherever you're at? And therefore providing the strength that your brothers and sisters need, because we're not going to succeed without this. Spiritual warfare is real. That's what I want you to get this morning. Now again, some of you still may be feeling some tension and thinking, I don't know if we should compare spiritual warfare with human warfare, but I'm going to do so because the stakes are higher, because the stakes are eternal. And this matters. The good news of the gospel is, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is that Jesus has already won. Through his death and through his resurrection, the war has been won. Now, it's difficult to explain the intricacies of all this. I'm not even sure I understand all the intricacies, but Satan is still alive and active in our world. God has given him that ability. He's not in control. He doesn't have all power, but he still has some power left, even though he knows he's going down. For eternity, he knows he's going down. But here's what he wants to do. He wants to bring up all of us with him. He knows he's lost. He knows he's going down, and he wants you to go with him. But you don't have to, and you don't have to fight this battle alone. We've got each other. And so here in a minute, we're going to sing a song. And maybe this song's just an opportunity for you to bring your personal struggle to a larger group of people. I recognize that's not for everybody, but maybe for you, you need to bring whatever it is you're struggling with. You've been fighting it on your own. You feel like you're on your own, and you want to bring it and share it with this group of people. We would love to pray for you and help you in that. But if that's not your thing, here's what we want you to know. This isn't about a 3-minute song. The leaders of this church, our elders, our deacons, our ministers, we all want you to know you can come to us anytime. And we will join. We want you to know that we're already in this battle with you, but we'll join up with you in even more significant ways if you need to bring something to us. Maybe as you think about this war, it kind of wakes you up to the reality that you want to be on the right side. You want to be with Christ. And to be with Christ, you need to be in Christ. And today, you can be baptized into Christ if that's where your journey has brought you to today. I mentioned a few minutes ago that we watched the Harriet movie, and near the end of it, there's this powerful moment where Harriet is now well known in the circles that are trying to abolish slavery and those who are trying to rescue slaves. And there's this big meeting at the house of a senator, a U.S. senator in New York. And in this meeting, you've got some significant white political figures, and you've got several African Americans who are big into this fight and trying to rescue people from slavery. And things are really hard right now. The government has just passed an act, Congress has just passed an act, it's hard to imagine, that says that if any slave has escaped, you can go anywhere in the United States and arrest them and take them back. So in this process of Harriet and others trying to go and rescue slaves, now it's become really dangerous because you've got these people who are contracted to find escaped slaves and bring them down. This is a bad, bad time. And so basically the folks in this meeting are saying, what are we going to do? Is war the answer, or do we just stop and let war happen? Or I don't think we can do this anymore. It's too dangerous. And Harriet steps up and challenges them and says, we can't stop trying to rescue these slaves. We've got to keep doing this. And they object and they say it's just too dangerous. By now, some of them are hanging out in Canada. It's just too dangerous and it's too far. We cannot do this. And Harriet responds with some words that I want to read to you. And while these are words that are in a very specific context, I want to be clear about that. Obviously, she's speaking to some people and challenging them to fight against slavery. She's speaking to some people, in fact, some former slaves and some folks, African Americans, who had not been born into slavery. They'd been born into freedom. They'd been born with their freedom. And she's speaking to them in their comfort. Now, here's where I think this applies to us. It's easy for us in our comfortable American Christianity to think it's not so bad. We're not really at war. This isn't really that big of a deal. Matt, you're exaggerating things. I want you to hear her words and apply them to us. When they said, we can't do this anymore, she said, in the movie, I ain't giving up rescuing slaves because it's far. Many of you don't know slavery firsthand. You were born free, or you've been free so long, you forget what it's like. You've gotten comfortable and important. You've got beautiful homes, beautiful wives. But I remember children beat for not working before they understand what work is. Brothers whipped till their backs are ripped. Sisters sold from their babies. We try not to think what they went through and that those still enslaved are going through right now. I've heard their groans and their sighs and seen their tears, and I would give every last drop of blood in my veins to free them, so I ain't giving up. We're at war. And though things are pretty comfortable and peaceful, and praise God for that, we're thankful for what we've got, we must not forget where we came from. That all of us were once slaves of sin and slaves of Satan. And people around us every day are still enslaved by him, and Satan is still attacking every single day. And we can't give up. The spiritual warfare is real. But Jesus has already won the battle, so we fight on.